We'll discuss today the mitzvah of haseba, the mitzvah of reclining, and specifically the mitzvah of reclining during the 4 cups of wine. So the Gemara in Pesachim Adaf Kuf Ches Amud Aleph 108a raises the possibility that perhaps not all of the 4 cups require reclining. And the Gemara gives different accounts in the names of Rav Nachman, because some students claim that he required reclining, some students say he didn't require reclining, and the Gemara says it's no problem, we could reconcile. The one of them is talking about the first 2 cups, and one is talking about the last 2 cups. The only problem is we're not sure which 2 of the 4 cups you have to recline on. So the Gemara mentions it down in the name of Rav Nachman, and we're not sure which 2 should we recline on, the first 2 or should we recline on the last 2. And then the Gemara concludes, since we're not sure, Aidi va'aidi by haseba. The Gemara says one should recline by all 4 cups. That's the Gemara. There's a famous question of the Ran. The Ran writes in Arvei Pesachim, we know we have general rules in the Gemara. We have a doubt regarding a biblical law, we were strict on. Savek d'oraisa l'chumra, doubt regarding a biblical law, we're strict on. Savek d'Rabbanan l'kula, doubt regarding a rabbinic law, we're lenient on. So therefore the Ran asks, the mitzvah of Dalit Kosos is only a mitzvah midrabanan, is only a rabbinical mitzvah, and it's a doubt on which 2 of the 4 cups we should recline on while drinking them. So why would the Gemara say you have to be machmir on all 4? We're usually lenient. So why would the Gemara conclude Aidi v'aidi by haseba? So the Ran gives 2 answers. The Ran's first answer is Ein achinami, you're right. Really, we do paskin savek d'Rabbanan l'kula. However, here it's not a big deal. It's not a milsa d'tircha. It's not something which is a big burden and takes a long time to do. So since it's not a burden, it's not something that takes a lot of work. So therefore, we don't apply savek d'Rabbanan l'kula in a situation where it's not hard to be strict. So that's the first answer of the Ran. The second answer, the first answer, I think we really do apply the principle, except that why not be strict if it's easy to do. The second answer is saying we don't apply the principle. There is no principle of savek d'Rabbanan l'kula here. Why not? Because if you apply the principle of savek d'Rabbanan l'kula, we have no reason to pick the first 2 cups over the last 2 cups. So it's a safek hashakol. So therefore, what's going to happen? I get to the first 2 cups, I'll say, well, savek d'Rabbanan l'kula, I'm not going to recline. I get to the last 2 cups, I say savek d'Rabbanan l'kula, I'm not going to recline. I'll end up not reclining at all. And that's definitely a wrong conclusion, because the Gemara concludes, the Gemara, everyone agrees according to Rav Nachman, you have to recline at least on 2 out of the 4 cups. The question is which 2 out of the 4. So the fact you're going to come to the wrong conclusion, that's a savek d'Rabbanan b'makam tarte desastre, in a case where it's going to lead to a contradiction, which doesn't make any sense, and therefore we don't apply the principle of savek d'Rabbanan l'kula. In fact, that's a famous Beis Halevi, where someone said, we know today Shemitah is only d'Rabbanan, and there's a doubt regarding the machokas among the Rambam, the Gaonim, about how do you actually count the years of Shemitah. Because, let's say, when you have Shemitahs every 7th year, but then you have Yovel. So is Yovel counted within the 4? Do you go 149 back to 1, or it's 1 to 50 backstones. This whole discussion every specific year is a machokes. It's a suffix which year is actually the Shemitah year. So one rabbi said, we don't have to keep Shemitah today because suffix D'Rabbanan L'Kula. Shemitah is only D'Rabbanan, and it's a doubt which year, so therefore you don't have to keep Shemitah. The Beis HaLevi said, what, are you kidding me? It's against the Ran and Arvei Pesachim. The Ran writes, you don't apply the principle of suffix D'Rabbanan L'Kula when it's going to lead to the wrong conclusion. So everyone agrees Shemitah applies, so the question is which year? If you're going to go suffix D'Rabbanan L'Kula this year and next year, you're not going to have any Shemitah, and that's definitely wrong. So that's what the Ran says. Really, we don't apply the principle. The reason we have to be strict here, because since we can't apply the principle, because it's going to lead to a wrong conclusion, a wrong consequence, therefore we don't apply it. That's the second answer of the Ran. There's another answer from the other Rishonim, the Shilte Giborim. He gives a different answer to the Ran's question. He says, when do we say Savik Rabbanan L'Kula if there's a machlokes in the Gemara over an issue? Let's say there's two accepted opinions, two rabbis, and then we have a machlokes, so you can say Savik Rabbanan L'Kula. But here he points out that it's saying in the name of Rav Nachman only said one of them. We don't know. It's a suffix in Mitzias. We don't know which one he actually said. So if there's a suffix in if the rabbi even actually said it, not that we know it's an accepted opinion and it's a question which one we follow, then we apply suffix Rabbanan L'Kula. But here we are uncertain what Rav Nachman actually said, so then we don't apply the principle of suffix Rabbanan L'Kula. So that's the third answer on the Ran's question from the Shilte Giborim. Another answer given by the Ran is an interesting answer. It's found in the Haggadah of Chacham Chazon Abadja, Chacham Abadja's Haggadah. So he raises an interesting answer. He quotes in the Divrei Tzvi that we assume that we pass him like Rav Nachman, and the Gemara just goes stringent and says this ID by Haseba. He wants to suggest something novel, that the Gemara rejects Rav Nachman, that Rav Nachman gave his opinion only 2 out of the 4 cups require reclining, and comes along the Gemara and we reject that. And in fact, the Gemara says ID by Haseba, we say we don't pass it. It doesn't do with Savik Rabbanan L'Kula. We don't pass like Rav Nachman. And the fifth approach is from the Beis HaLevi, that when do we say Savik Rabbanan L'Kula if it's going to lead to a Kula? But many times when you have a Kula, it can lead to a Chumrah. I.e., like if I'm going to say, well, Savik Rabbanan L'Kula, I'm only going to read on the first 2 cups and not the last 2, then maybe it's the last 2 that are needed. Or if I do the last 2, maybe it's the first 2. So anytime you're going to invoke Savik Rabbanan L'Kula and you're going to end up with a Kula and a Chumrah, so based on Tosis and Beya, Daf Yudal and Aleph, we don't apply the principle of Savik Rabbanan L'Kula here because it leads to a Kula and a Chumrah. So basically we have 5 explanations to the famous Kasha of the Ran. The Ran's question, why don't we say Savik Rabbanan L'Kula? Why do we recline in all 4? Either, when we answer the ones we do apply the principle, except with this really strict, it's just a Chumrah B'Alma, why not recline in all 4? But really, if you didn't recline, it seems to be okay. But according to the the second answer, I know. Savik Rabbanan L'Kula doesn't apply because it'll lead to the conclusion you don't have to recline in any of the cups, and that's definitely wrong. Well, as the Shilte Giborim said, it's only if you have a accepted machlokas among the rabbis, so we're not sure which opinion, so Savik Rabbanan L'Kula. But here, we don't even know, it's just said in the name, or we don't even know what Rav Nachman said, and therefore, we have to go L'Chumrah. Therefore, we don't apply Savik Rabbanan L'Kula. Then we have the interesting explanation Avad Yosef goes in the Ritzvid. No, it's not that we're passing Safek Rabbanan L'chumra. It's we're not passing like Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman's opinion was 2 out of the 4. When the fact the Gemara concludes Adi by Seba means we don't pass like Rav Nachman. And then you have the Beis HaLevi. We only apply Safek Rabbanan L'kula if it's a kula. But if there's going to be a kula and a chumra associated with it, if I recline on the first 2, I might be wrong. Because it might be the last 2. If I did the last 2, it might be the first 2. Hence, we don't apply the principle of Safek Rabbanan L'kula. We'll focus on the mitzvah of haseba, the mitzvah of reclining. So the Gemara tells us in Pesachim on Daf Kufches on 108 in Arvei Pesachim, the mitzvah when one drinks the wine. So the Gemara says matzah. When you eat the matzah, you have to recline. When you eat the maror, you don't recline because matzah represents freedom, and maror represents slavery. We don't recline when we're having the maror, but we recline when we have the matzah. Those are givens. And the Gemara raises the question: what about wine? When we're drinking the wine, does that require haseba as well? So there's an interesting discussion in the Gemara in the name of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman discussed, again, it's not Rav Nachman himself talking, it's the students or people saying in the name of Rav Nachman, that some say in the name of Rav Nachman you need reclining, and some say in the name of Rav Nachman you don't need reclining. So it seems to be inconclusive evidence. So Gemara concludes, no, they're both right. That Rav Nachman's opinion was, on 2 out of the 4 cups you recline. The only problem was, we're not clear on which 2. And should you recline on the first 2? Is that what Rav Nachman requires? Or does it require the last? And the Gemara gives different reasons for the logic behind each whether it's the first 2 or last 2. And therefore the Gemara is going back and forth whether it's the first 2 or last 2, and it's inconclusive. So the Gemara concludes, ID by haseba. The Gemara concludes, all 4 require reclining. So the Gemara seems to start off inconclusive. We're not sure 2 out of the 4, but the Gemara concludes the bottom line is we recline, just like we recline on the matzah, we recline on the wine and all 4. So the famous question of the Ran, we have a famous principle in the Talmud, Safek da'oraisa l'chumra, a doubt regarding a biblical law was strict on, a doubt regarding a rabbinical Safek Rabbanan L'kula. So the mitzvah of drinking the 4 cups is a rabbinical mitzvah. So the Ran says, what happened to the classic principle of Safek Rabbanan L'kula? Why should I be reclining Dalit Kosas is Rabbanan? I'm not sure which of the 4 cups. So I should only recline on 2 cups or whatever. But definitely, why am I reclining on all 4? It's Safek Rabbanan L'kula, just recline on 2 of the 4. Or perhaps none, or whatever, we'll see. So the Ran has 2 answers. One answer is basically, yeah, you're right. Really, we do apply Safek Rabbanan L'kula, and really, you don't really have to go back. Really, if you didn't recline, perhaps it would be good. But the only reason why the Gemara says "Aidi by Aseba," that in a case where it's a milsa, which isn't a tircha, something which doesn't take a lot of work to do, so why not? But you're right. We should apply the klal here. It's just that it's something that's easy. So if you can do it, do it. So that's the first. And the Ran likes the second answer. To the second answer, the Mishnah Berurah likes the first answer. The Mishnah Berurah writes, he likes using this Ran on any Safek Rabbanan. Anytime you have a Safek Rabbanan, if it's not a big deal, you shouldn't rely on it. Safek Rabbanan L'kula is a b'di'eved, not a lechatchila. Comes along the second answer, much more fundamental. No, we can apply the principle of Safek Rabbanan L'kula. Why not? So he says as follows, because what's going to happen? He says we have a Safek Hashakol here. In other words, we have no reason to favor the first 2 over the last 2. We have reasons to do either one. So you can't pick one over the other. So what's going to happen? I'll get to the first 2 cups. I'll say Safek Rabbanan L'kula, and I won't recline. I'll get to the last two cups, I'll say Savik Rabbanon Kula, I won't recline. I'll end up not reclining at all. You'll be okay the mitzvah Seibu Lagamre. It's definitely wrong. Everyone agrees in the name of Rav Nachman you need reclining. So if you can apply the principle of Savik Rabbanon Kula and end up with the wrong conclusion, that means we don't apply the principle of Savik Rabbanon Kula. Like the Beis Halevi wrote, that one suggested that maybe today we don't have to keep Shemitah, because Shemitah is D'Rabbanan to Bizman Hazeh, and as well as the Machlokas among the Rambam and the Gaonim, how you count Shemitah and Yovel. Do you go from 1 to 49 back to 1, or do you go to 1 to 50 back to 1? So Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula. So the Beis Halevi said, it might sound good, but it's against the Ran in Pesach. No, you can't apply. Everyone agrees it's Shemitah. The question is, what year is Shemitah? And if Safek Rabbanan L'Kula is going to lead you to the erroneous conclusion and the erroneous consequence, so then we don't apply the principle. Hence, we recline in all four. So those are the two answers of the Ran. So we might as well give the other. We'll give three more answers to the Ran question, then we'll deal with the other question. And so, another answer given to the question of the Ran is in the Shiltei HaGiborim. So the Shiltei HaGiborim also is bothered. How come we don't say Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula? So all these answers are going to come up, or we'll see. So the second answer is saying, well, Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula doesn't apply because we come to the wrong conclusion. So the Shiltei HaGiborim says, when do we say Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula? When we have a machlokas among, let's say, two rabbis, we know it's not in doubt what they said. We know what they said. We're not sure who we paskin like. The two valid opinions, two good rabbis, and we're not sure which is the halacha. So then, then there's a Savik. Then we could say Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula because those two opinions are real. But in the case here, it was people saying in the name of, it was two students saying in the name of Rav Nachman. Only one was right. He didn't, because everyone agrees Rav Nachman said you only have to recline on two. The problem is, one of them fell asleep in the middle of Shiur or whatever happened, and they both were claiming, either one was claiming the first, so then we said we don't apply Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula if it's a mitzvah, if it's a factual issue. Because if it's 2 days, we know is machlokas Abaye Rava, whoever machlokas, we know it's two valid opinions. Then the principle of Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula comes into play. But without being sure it was said, and we know in fact it wasn't, and only one of the things was said, so then we can't apply the principle of Safek D'Rabbanan. That's the answer of the Shiltei HaGiborim. That's A3. A4. Chacham Avaja, Avaja Yosef brings down in his Haggadah, I think from the Divrei Tzvi or something like that, he quotes someone. He says, he has a very interesting explanation of the Gemara. So what's the way to simply, I'd say the Pshuto of the Gemara, how everyone else learns the Gemara. Basically it's a discussion within Rav Nachman, whether you recline on the first two. Rav Nachman says, you only recline on two, and the different opinions whether the first or last two. Then the Gemara says, "Id by Isaiah." So the way the Ran clearly learns the Gemara and others is that basically we're following Rav Nachman and we're just going l'chumra now for whatever the reason given. We don't say Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula, but basically we're working with Rav Nachman's opinion. Rav Yosef quotes in the Haggadah, no. Rav Nachman Shita is only 2 out of the 4. When the Gemara says, "Aidi v'aidi b'yaseba," the Gemara is passing against Rav Nachman. It's not Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula. Nothing to do with it here. It's basically, that's Rav Nachman's opinion. The fact that we say you recline all 4, we are rejecting Rav Nachman, and that's why. But not that you don't have to try to fit Rav Nachman into the 4. Rav Nachman only says 2 out of the 4. We reject Rav Nachman and we recline on all 4. That's Avaja Yosef's pshat, creative pshat, in the Gemara. Not the most learned, but a very interesting pshat as well. That was A4. A5 is the Beis Halevi. The Beis Halevi, based on a Tosis and Beya, I think in Naviyud Beis, he wants to also limit the klal. When do we say Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula? That's only if it's exclusively a Kula. If I apply Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula, it has to be only a Kula. But if I apply Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula, it ends up being a Kula and a Chumrah, then we don't apply the klal. So for instance here, so if I say that, okay, that you have to recline on the first two cups, if I say Rav Nachman holds, and I'll say the first two cups, then it comes out I'm being lenient on the last two. Because maybe it was the opposite. Rav Nachman only said the last two. Or the reverse. If I require so therefore, if you're going to say Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula here, you can end up, it's going to end up being a Kula and a Chumrah because you're not, because whichever one you're going to take, it's going to, you might be wrong on the other side. So the Beis Halevi says we don't apply the principle of Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula because it's not exclusively a Kula, but it could come out that that you're not Yotzia because it comes out. If you're recording, he only said 2 out of the 4. If you're recording on the wrong one, you can get messed over. So we see different reasons among the Rishonim and Achronim. The first answer to the Ran is more of a. It's not really lumped. It's just saying, practically speaking, we do apply it, but it's technical and it's simple. So let's go ahead and do it. Then we have the more fundamental column, which apply, keeping these column in mind, they're all of a shas. Anytime you see a Safek and a D'Rabbanan, we're not going L'Kula, all these principles will be popping into your head and you'll try to figure out which one of these, if any, apply to the issue at hand. So the famous one, the Ran about Oker, that if it comes to the wrong conclusion, that's the Beis Halevi by Shemitah. And then we had the Shiltei Agibor. It's only if you have 2 actual opinions accepted, but not 2 opinions on what one person actually said. We only said one of them. Or we had, again, about Yosef, he's not telling me anything about Savik D'Rabbanan. He's saying it's nothing to do with Savik D'Rabbanan. So about Yosef, it's a nice answer, but won't help us with Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula. And then we have the other in the Beis Halevi. Savik D'Rabbanan is only if it's L'Kula. If there's going to be a Kula and a Chumrah, so we don't apply the klal of Savik D'Rabbanan. Since this case it will lead to a Kula and a Chumrah, definitely we don't apply it. So that's some different approaches to how we answer the famous Kasha of the Ran. Now so that was the Ran's Kasha on the Gemara. Now let's get an apparent contradiction in the Ran himself. So what did the Ran say? It's the Gemara, but the Ran says that basically that when the way he learns the Gemara, that Rav Nachman says you only have to recline on either the first 2 or the last 2. Since we don't know, and if we apply Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula, we'd be left with nothing. So therefore we recline him. So when in doubt here, the Ran doesn't say Savik D'Rabbanan L'Kula. There seems to be a similar case. It's a Gemara and Megillah, it's a discussion of the Rishonim. We know the Mishnah tells us in the beginning of Megillah that there are different days different people read. So day 14 is the day for most of Klal Yisrael. That's basically all the cities in the world. 15th, a walled city from the time of Yeshua ben Nun. And then there's a special dispensation in the time of the Mishnah, 11, 12, or 13 for the villages. So there's different zmana. Okay, so therefore, the Rishonim raise it. What about a city which is a suffix? The Gemara raises it, but how you interpret the Gemara will be the key. So we'll go to the Rishonim for that. You have a suffix mukfus chama Yeshua ben Nun. Not sure when this became a walled city. Is this city, whatever I think it might have been Tiberias, whatever the city was they're talking about in the Gemara. There's a certain city they weren't sure if it was a walled city or not. Well, it was definitely a walled city now. The question was they weren't sure if it was a walled city for the time of Yeshua ben Nun.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do then? So when do you read Megillah? So the Rambam writes, you read Megillah on the 14th and the 15th. He says you read it on both. Since it's a Safek Muchlas Chamas, you read it on both. I believe that's the Rambam. And the Ran writes, you only read it on the 14th. So the Shaya, they all ask, these two Rans seem to be an apparent contradiction. If the Ran was consistent, he would say, well, Safek Rabbanan, you don't say Safek Rabbanan L'Kula here. You don't know which, this like by Dalet Kosas, we recline on all four. So too, Safek Muchlas Chama. So why did the Ran say only 14, not 14 and 15? So you could get into a whole issue in terms of, which I'm not getting into, what's the status of the Megillah, if it's Divrei Kabbalah and Divrei Torah, so then it touches on a different issue. Let's assume not that route. So the Rambam writes you do 14th and 15th, because, so some learn the Gemara, that's the Pshat, you have to read both, because it's a Safek Muchlas, even though it's a Safek Rabbanan, but yet the Rambam, writes anyway, you go ahead and you read on both days. And the Ran writes you only read on the 14th. So the Mishnah Lamelech asks, these two Rans seem to contradict themselves. But the Ran, so what the question is, according to the Ran, what's the difference? How come when it comes to the 4 cups of wine by the reclining, we say, we don't apply Safek Rabbanan L'Kula, yet why don't we say the same? Why did the Ran say Safek Muchlas Chama, Megillah is Drabanan? Why not say, how come he does say? He says Safek Rabbanan L'Kula by Megillah, but he doesn't say it by Dalet Kosas. So what's the lumdus? What's the distinction between the two cases? Why by the Dalet Kosas he doesn't say Safek Rabbanan L'Kula, but by the Safek Muchlas Chama he does? You hear the kasha?
Mm-hmm.
So the Mishnah Melech answers as follows. He says, because there's a fundamental difference. He says, because when it comes to the case of the Gemara of Pesach on Daf Kovches, we're being a Koveya Halacha L'Dor. In other words, we're determining the Halacha here. When do you recline? If do you recline, when do you recline? The first cup, second cup, third cup, fourth cup, whatever it was, whatever the issue is. So if you would apply Safek Rabbanan L'Kula, you'd be okay the mitzvah stable Lagamre. You wouldn't, if we would conclude and say Safek Rabbanan L'Kula, goodbye Haseba, will never happen. No one's ever going to recline again. And therefore, we're not going to be okay a mitzvah Lagamre, never have a mitzvah Vaseba. If there's supposed to be a mitzvah Vaseba, we're not going to uproot, and therefore if we apply the klal, no one will do Haseba anymore. Masha'in Kain. It's not in doubt. Everyone agrees to the facts here. A regular city reads on 14th of Adar. A walled city reads on the 15th. That's not debatable. That halacha is l'doros. Here the shayla is on a specific town. Like it's one specific town. We don't know. Okay, it's a big deal. So we can be Safek Rabbanan L'Kula. It's not affecting Klal Yisrael. So it's your specific. Okay, you read on the 14th. You don't have to worry about it. So that's what the Mishnah will write. One is if you're being Koveya din with Doros, whether there's a din about Seba, so then you can't apply Safek Rabbanan L'Kula. In other words, if you were being Koveya the din, when does the walled city read? And then that would be the equivalent. But that's the Mishnah Melech Chiluk. One was being Koveya the din. The other one is it's a detail in a specific city. So it's not going to affect Klal Yisrael as a whole. Everyone knows the facts of life. And therefore that specific city, so we could be lenient and read on the 14th. That's the Mishnah Melech. I think Rav Shlomo Kluger, he has a different answer. He wants to say, in the case of the Dalet Kosos, why don't we say Safek Rabbanan L'Kula? Because what's going to happen? Because let's say you do say, let's say I'll do I'm only going to recline on the first two cups, not the last two. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm supposed to recline in the last two. And let's say I recline in the last and not the first two. Maybe in other words, if I say something to Rabbi Kula, I might be reclining on the wrong cups. So therefore, you're in danger if you apply the Kala Sabda to Rabbi Kula, you'll be in danger of not fulfilling your mitzvah. In other words, you could lose out and not get the mitzvah of Aseba. Or perhaps not get the mitzvah of Dalet Kotzos, so maybe not Yotze either. Masha'ein Kain, again, this is the discussion, the Yerushalmi. This touches on the whole Shaila, because the it's a whole discussion about, in terms of, in the beginning of Megillah, so Machlokas Rashi and Tosas, what's actually happening. Actually, you're learning Megillah, or you were before, I don't know if you still are, but in terms of when the Kfarim go in and read in the cities, who's reading the Megillah for them? Let's say on 11, 12, and 13. So Rashi learns it's the Bnei Yair reading for them. And Tosas, that can't be. They're not a Bar Chiyuva. According to Tosas, no, they weren't Amoratzim. They knew how to read Megillah. They just said they couldn't get together, so they just picked a central spot to meet in the big city. And because Tosas is bothered, how could a Bar, and why? Because we see the Yerushalmi writes, a Ben Krach can't read for a Ben Ir, and a Ben Ir can't read for a Ben Krach. So he says so too here. So hence Tosas rejects it, he comes up with his own answer. But how do we answer up Rashi? So obviously Rashi will hold no. That fundamentally the din of Kfar is really the 14th. In other words, when do they do Shalach Manas? When do they do Suda? That they do Bo B'Yom. All they're doing is hearing the Megillah, maybe Matanas Lav Yonim. Because these two of them, but everything else, so it's not, so basically it's, according to Rashi, the Ben Ir is the same Chiyuv. They're also, their day is 14. So therefore, everyone's really Chai 14, so therefore there's no problem for the, it's considered, they're not considered Eino Bar Chiyuva. So therefore, then perhaps you can make a distinction when it comes to Ben Krach 14th and 15th. So then you could argue, you could argue differently that the Yerushalmi is saying those are fundamental differences. One could argue on the point. That's what the Shlomo Koger, based on others, he says that everyone agrees. The bottom, he wants to say, this is the point. But even bottom line, if someone in the Mukhvas Chama read on the 14th, bottom line is Yotze. He's still considered, he'd be fulfill his obligation. Again, it gets into a separate issue in terms of how do you define residence? In other words, could I avoid hearing the Megillah on Purim, or can I put myself in a situation where I have to have both days? And what's the koveya? So Pashtus is wherever you are. They claim, I don't know if it's true. They claim that I think Nechama Leibowitz, his brother, who I think was a character in general, he might have been someone in the army who was dreaming about Kaddish with the Chazeri, but the family denies it, so I'll accept the family denial. And so let's say someone doesn't like Purim. So great. So the Koveya is, let's say, Alos HaShachar. So on the 14th, I'll make sure I'm in Jerusalem. And the 15th in the morning, I'll make sure I'm in Tel Aviv. And then, so I'm exempt. So if someone wants to say a Chiddush, you can exempt. You don't like Purim, you can exempt. So we don't assume that. So we assume Pashas, that's not the way it works. I mean, the Chazon Ish might say like that. Pashas, we assume, or we don't know the Chazon Ish says like we're about to say. No, the 14th day's Koveya, wherever you are the 14th that morning, that's determined where your day is. So if you're in Yerushalayim on the 14th, it doesn't go by every day switching. That's what we assume. You can't get out of, you can't exempt yourself from the Megillah. So therefore what the Shlomo Koger writes, but that basically everyone's Yotze on the 14th. Even if a Ben Krach heard the Megillah, he's Yotze. So therefore that's what he says. It's not, when it came to you can't say something about an Lakula by the Dalka because you'll end up, if you put yourself in a scenario where you're not Yotze the mitzvah. But Chazal set it up according to Shlomo Lakula that by no matter what, everyone's Yotze on the 14th, so therefore the Savet Muchvas Chama, even if you read on the 14th, you're Yotze, and therefore that's why you can say Savet Rabban and Lakula. You got the Rav Shlomo Lakula, so let's summarize. So we had the famous kasha of the Ran, Savet Rabban and Lakula. Why don't we say by the four codes? Why ideally by Aseba? So the first answer really we do, but you might as well be strict because what's the big deal? It's easy to do. The fundamental to the Ran, it's a tarte desastre. It's going to lead to an erroneous conclusion. Hence, you can't apply Savet Rabban and Lakula. Number 3, the Shichte HaGiborim. You only say Savet Rabban and Lakula if it's two real people arguing. If it's speculation on what one person said, then we're not going to accept it as a Savet Rabban and Lakula. You have a Vaji Yosef, nothing to do with Savet Rabban and Lakula. The Gemara doesn't pass like Rav Nachman. A Raya we don't, because he only said 2, and he turns the Kash into the Teretz. And 5, the Beis HaLevi, we only say Savet Rabban and Lakula if it's an exclusive Kula. And then we had the Ran and Megillah, the Savet Muchvas Chama. So you would think he would say, okay, don't say Savet Rabban and Lakula. You should read Megillah on the 14th to 15th. Yet the same Ran who says you don't say Savet Rabban and Lakula by the Daled Kosas says you do say Savet Rabban and Lakula by a Savet Muchvas Chama. The question is why? Why the distinction? The Mishnah allows the distinction is by it's not a fundamental. The fundamental depends. You have to know what the case is. If you're being koveya halach ladoros, and therefore you're going to okay the mitzvah baseba, then you can't apply Savet Rabban and Lakula. But if we're talking about a local din for one town, we're not worried. It's not going to affect Klal Yisrael. So then in that specific town, we could go Lakula. Or if Shlomo Lakula is the answer, no, that's not the distinction. Is Savet Rabban and Lakula you can't say by Dalkos because if you might get it wrong, and then you'll end up reclining on the. If you're only going to recline on 2 out of the 4. You might pick the wrong 2, and then you might not be yotze the mitzvah. Again, that gets into how you define. Maybe when you could argue that once you take Torah little kula, that's the Torah's vada. But I get into a different chair, so we'll stay out of that for now. But just want to throw it out there. And then, however, when it comes to Savet Muchvas Chama, according to the whole discussion, but according to some, everyone yotze even a Muchvas Chama, and therefore you could say Savet Rabban Lakula because even worst case scenario, you definitely fulfill your mitzvah of Megillah. So these are some of the issues regarding the mitzvah Haseba. So we need Haseba. That's what's different. Leil Pesach versus all year round. We have to recline during Kiddush and the 4 cups. And as a Lachol Amaisa, we assume on the first 2 cups you go back. The last 2 cups you don't go back. But that's because it's for external reason, because the first 2 cups you're allowed to drink in the middle, so therefore there's no harm. If you don't recline, drink another cup while you recline. But the last 2 cups, there's the problem of eating something after that Afikomen, so therefore, since it's a suffix or Rabbanon, so therefore, for the last 2 cups we don't go back, so therefore once you try to remember, once you also have in mind that when you make the Bari Priya Gafen, it's going on everything, just in case you forget to recline. But usually if you remember to have that kavanah, you probably won't forget to recline. But either they say when you make the bar break up, have in mind for wine to drink throughout the meal. Even though the minhag is just not to drink more wine during the meal, but just in case you forget to recline, you don't have to deal with the new bar kriya gafen issue.